Are we live?
We are live.
All right. Well, welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with co-host Joshua Morgan, BDEX marketing extraordinaire, and of course, David Finkelstein, BDEX's co-founder and CEO. So today's guest is Chris Daly, a pioneer in the marketing data space. Chris is the president and CMO of TBG Marketing, a digital agency here in Columbus, Ohio. He focuses on growth marketing and fractional CMO solutions. He has a wide history in data marketing and has worked with many major retail brands. Back in 2006, Chris and the team at Bill Me Later built a method for leveraging AEs to profile best fit customers, gather intel, and leverage executives to open doors and shorten cycles. So thanks for being here, Chris. And
Yeah.
for those who are watching, I know a lot about you. So for those who are watching, though, could you please start from the beginning and tell us your whole story and what inspired you to get into marketing in the first place?
That's because Jesse and I have been exploring coffee shops in downtown Columbus, so there's a lot of them. Well, thanks for having me on the show. I'll give you a little bit about my background. It goes pretty far back. Probably the first time I ever did anything with data was on a Commodore 64 in like maybe 1984, something like that, where I was kind of amazed that I could write a little piece of code and make the screen flash different colors. So that was probably the first step. I went to college. I went to the Ohio State University, graduated in 1991 with a degree in marketing. Went right into marketing and sales right out of the gate. Worked with an energy marketing company that was downtown Columbus. We built about $100 million market in the course of about a year, give or take. But that was another place where I got into running reports. I had to be able to query databases to run reports for a custom application that was built by one of the members of the company. So I learned how to go around querying data and getting information and getting insights and sharing that with the sales teams that I worked with. After that, I went back. I got my master's at the University of Cincinnati and a one-year full-time MBA. I highly recommend those. They are wicked hard, but they're wicked fun, very fast. Studied marketing and information systems. Already saw the writing on the wall that information systems were coming along. It was going to be a big deal for marketing. How you can collect data, use data to market and understand customers, what they buy, who's good, who's not. That all started, really in my first job out of college. From there, I ended up at a company called Alliance Data. I think they're called Bread Financial now. I don't know if they changed their name to Bread. I'm sure I understand that. But Alliance Data, we were spun out of Limited Credit Services. It was spun out of Limited Brands and merged with JCPenney's Credit Services to create Alliance Data. I was in 1996, I believe it was, and I started there in 1998. When that spin out happened, we also happened to have their marketing database. Oops. So we were running all the marketing campaigns for Limited Brands and a number of other brands that were in that portfolio. There were about 17 of those out there. And it was there that I was sort of tasked with doing a lot of work with helping architect the new enterprise data warehouse for what we needed to execute and analyze campaigns, do all sorts of ad hoc queries where we had SKU item data on 86 million customers in the United States. We had a prospecting universe of another 80 million customers in the United States, all in one database. And this was at about 2000. So we were way ahead of a lot of people in what we were doing. And we learned how to collect data so that we could do customization. We learned how to collect data to affect offers, creative, and lists. So we learned a lot about that. And we worked with our clients to help them build really what was a very remarkable information system. From there, I worked for a company called Bill Me Later. Yes. Very fun startup, probably one of the best places I've ever worked. If you want to talk about corporate culture, they had the best one. It was just a lot of fun. But it was the first time marketing sales was like this. We did everything together. We were on calls together. We went to meetings together. And the way that we went about it was, you call it account-based marketing today, but we didn't call it that. We just said we were spying on people. LinkedIn was nascent at this time. It was only a couple of years old. But we were using it to sit down and go, well, who does this person know that we know that is already using the Bill Me Later mark? And then how do we understand what are their needs? What are they posted in LinkedIn? And from that, we were able to sit down and profile them a little bit. That sounds really bad. But every time we sat down in a meeting, it felt like we knew each other. And so the meetings wouldn't last any more than 20, 30 minutes. And the answer was yes before we were done almost every time. So we knew them very well. We learned how to use the data and the information to profile it and meet people and extend relationships. And those relationships have gone on for years and years and years since then. So And then after that, I was a CMO for a small payments company here in Columbus, Ohio. Did that work for about a year and a half. Wasn't really what I wanted to do. Helped them achieve a couple things. Then I walked off into the consulting world. I started the agency. The one thing I did learn from 2CO, which was kind of an interesting thing, was there's a billion people on the planet that could do work that were really good. There were marketers all over the world, and that the idea of a distributed workforce is the most agile you can get. And I was like, I don't need to hire anybody. I can contract everybody. And I did. I started contracting people like, this is working. I don't know. Why is this working? And so anytime I wanted to do anything where I wanted to run marketing campaigns, or if I wanted to do consulting on a data warehouse, I had myself as a sort of the project manager, and then I had all the other team members I needed to work. And I've been doing that now for 11 years this year. Actually, it was 11 years a couple days ago. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. We work now more specifically with management consultants because they have problems collecting data and getting the right information to do their customization. So that's kind of my background. I've been around data and database marketing forever. One of the things that Alliance Data we did was probably one of the more advanced customer persona modelings that anybody has ever done. We did this on a mainframe where we actually understood. I think we had something like 10,000 columns of data we could use. Today, it's like 1 million columns, and you have so much data. But we were able to create very unique buyer behavior driven personas first, and then we enhance them with other data. So how you use the data is very important too, because today people create their ICP, but it's basically kind of a gut and a few of your customers, and then you sort of enhance them. So there's a different way to do it in the B2C world than there is in the B2B world, because you have a lot more data to do it with. So it's behavioral. So behavioral data has been my thing for a very long time. There you go. And now I'm here. And yesterday I was whiskey. It was really fun. I had an Old Town East too, by the way, if you didn't know. It was rye whiskey. It's good stuff.
Chris, that's an awesome introduction. You obviously have a wealth of experience in marketing and data. And so I'm curious, what would you say is your biggest challenge, or you've seen the biggest challenges that B2C brands are facing today with first-party data?
I think B2C brands are, depending on which they are, right? If you're a CPG company, you have a hard time collecting data anyways, unless you're selling directly to the customer or through your own site, which a lot of that is happening. In retail today, you used to see Levi's was sold in 45 different places. Now Levi's has a very, very robust e-commerce site. So now they're collecting that data. So you're kind of competing. Yeah. That's not a lot of fun if you're selling Levi's stuff. But so it depends on what you're in. If you're a CPG like a Procter & Gamble, you're still not seeing a lot of information about customers. You kind of have to do third-party research and primary research through focus groups and stuff like that. It's old stuff, but they still do it because it works for them. But there's also a new emergence now of these DTC brands. If you haven't seen them, brands like Squatch and some of the others that have come out that were just kind of funny things that took a spin on, let's have organic soaps or something. And they had funny commercials, but they learned a ton about those customers really quickly because they were targeting millennials. They were targeting people who wanted to do a better job with skincare and didn't like all the chemical additives and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun to see the transition between companies and the challenges that they have. In most e-commerce companies, they're so rife with data, it's not funny. But that third-party data that they have, where they might be tracking people outside, is starting to blind them a little bit. Some of the email campaigns that they have, and some of the tracking campaigns. So now, but the fortunate thing for them is they have so much behavioral data on their site and in their database of what they buy. That they probably have a better leg up than most in terms of profiling customers. So they're not in a bad place, but it's still tricky for them to do. And the third-party data is going to hurt. It's already hurt.
Yeah.
They watch their email open rates go like this, and I'm like, Apple, sorry. That's not what you can do about it. So you'll figure that out. And there are a couple of workarounds that I'm hearing about. I think Klaviyo actually has a little workaround where they're figuring some things out about how they track email opens. But the pixels aren't sending the information. So
yeah, well, companies are definitely going to have to find new ways of collecting data, because if the data is not available as a third-party data set, then they have to figure out how to collect first-party data. And so, like, to your point, if they're a CPG and they don't have a direct relationship with the customer, they have to build relationships that are going to enable them to work with someone who does have access to the customer and collect that data?
It's interesting because a lot of what we did in the late 90s, early 2000s was direct mail, right? So direct mail actually came up with the thing where when the direct mail piece landed in a home, UPS, the U.S. Postal Service, would scan a barcode and it would send a ping back to tell you it was there. So that was our pixel. The U.S. Postal Service had a pixel, if you will. So we knew what it was delivered at least, but we didn't know what else they did with it. But we knew it was delivered. So direct mail could do that. And I think that we're kind of moving back a little bit to that, which is it makes you really think a little bit about how do I collect data, the partnerships that I have with people that I rely on for them to share data with me. There may be times where you have companies like Walmart and Amazon licensing their data to people to say, here's what's happening with your brands because they can't see it. And so there's going to be a lot of that stuff coming on as more of this privacy happens. I saw a thing today in the news that the Senate was talking about breaking Google up from their ad network. And they passed some sort of initial piece of legislation, bipartisan, to start that process. So there's a lot of headwinds coming our way for us to start thinking about, because we've had a free reign for 20 years, but I think it's coming to an end. So you're really going to have to figure out your first party data.
Most of my direct mail goes into my recycle bin. So maybe the companies that are doing the recycling have to do that scanning so you can actually see if it was delivered.
Yeah, they do. I still get direct mail from my father. He passed away 5 years ago, and I'm still getting tons of direct mail from him. I'm like, it's a deceased list, guys. It's right there.
So bad. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta manage your data. And you know what? It's one of the things about digital that I don't care for is I don't think they curate their data as much as database marketers did, because it was expensive. You send a million postcards out that are wrong.
Yeah.
Not that that's ever happened. Okay,
There's stories there.
Maybe once. Oh Lord, the value of checking your work. So, but yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I think, speaking of which, if the recycling companies did that, there would be a way for them to make a little extra cash. I was asking when I was bartending, and we used to throw all these bottles out, plastics. And so I asked my boss, I go, why don't we recycle? And he goes, because they charge us to recycle. I'm like, well, what kind, so I was like, that is not an incentive to recycle.
Right.
They charge you to recycle. So, I mean, maybe they could do that and actually start recycling.
Well, if you talk to people today, people talk about having passive income, where I make income on blog posts or something like that, or a course that I did. If you think about it as a person who's collecting first-party data that somebody else wants, I have a passive income stream now of selling that data, kind of make sure that my customers know that we're doing it, but I could sell data in aggregate that never has any individual consumer information on it, and is still very relevant, right? So there's a lot of ways to do that. We did that. That's what we did. It's where demographic data was almost always, at a household level or even higher than that, depending on what you were trying to do when you're modeling. And I think we're going to see more of that kind of stuff coming around, where people are like, I have some data, I might share it out. This is what I don't know if you've ever heard of the company called Abacus. Abacus was and I think this still is, a place where catalogers would send all their data in, and out of that they would model lookalike customers. Right. So all these things that you're hearing about Google and LinkedIn and audiences, this was all done a long time ago. It's not
original modeling
for decades. And you're just like, okay, it's just easier to do now than what it was. So, and I think you'll see more of that, where people are sharing information in order to, work relationships and or generate revenues off of customer assets. So we'll see.
Well, so Chris, I was checking out your LinkedIn profile earlier, and one thing that I saw was a post that you created, and this is kind of a quote from you when you said that a common problem is the misinterpretation of the data and having multiple viewpoints on the same piece of data or information that are in conflict. And so usually when there are those two opposing views on a piece of information, it stems from the question being answered where it's poorly formed. And so my question to you is, what do you feel are the questions that should be asked to help bring those conflicting and opposing viewpoints into alignment?
So there's a lot of lack of clarity, and clarity is probably the number one driver of mistakes in America today. In all business, people you just don't speak clearly, and you're like, I didn't know what we were doing, right? So, and it would be like, tell me who our top customers are. Well, we have customers that spend $1,000 a year. Okay, well, let's do something with all them. Well, you could say, okay, let's go target all the customers that spend $1,000 a year. Now, in B2B, that might be one subscription and that's it. In B2C, you have maybe two customers. One who spends $1,000 a year, she shops twice and spends $500 each time, and one who shops 10 times. Do you think they're the same person? Absolutely not. They have different shopping behaviors. One lives 5 minutes away from the store, one lives 10 miles away. One works and drives past the store every day. One travels for work. She doesn't have time, and she comes in once every, couple 6 months to get what she wants for work, right? So when you learn those things about those customers, and those were some of the actual examples from persona models that we built. When you realize who those customers are, then you go, well, how do I serve that customer? Well, the one who shops twice, what's the first thing that pops into my mind? Clienteling. Hey, Jesse, we know that you're busy. You're going to come in the next couple of months. We have these items that we know your size, your color styles. Got a few new things that you'd like to come in. We've got a fitting room. Come on in and test it out. We'll take care of you in and out in an hour, right? Oh, yeah. Those are the things where you see like Stitch Fix of the world that comes in and says, I know your size, I know your measurements, etc. They're customizing with their data. You've got to have that first party data to do it, but it enables you to create solutions that attract people to your brand. And so it's that problem of clarity of, well, show me who my top customers are. Well, they are $1,000. I'm like, well, no, they're dramatically different how they buy. You have to ask the right question of who are the customers who shop more frequently and spend the most money with me? Just doing simple RFM, right? Recency, frequency, money. Those things alone can improve the clarity. So as we go forward in digital, which has, 100 times the amount of data than what we had before, it's going to be harder and harder for individuals to ask those questions. There may be some machine learning that has to go on because you go from 1,000, 10,000 columns to, 100,000 columns of data, and you're just like, I don't even know where to start. And the machines do. You can get them to use different algorithms to factor those down to find things that are relevant. So that's what I think you'll see more of, where people are a little bit more clarified the work that they do. They're asking better questions. We're talking a little bit about HubSpot. HubSpot actually had a really good quarter. The numbers were way up. And I said, how much of HubSpot's growth do you think was from the freemium model? And it was because I keep saying, lift, shift, retain. There's only three parts to growth, right? I lift the value of existing customers. I shift new customers to my business, and I retain the ones I've got. That's it. There's nothing else you can do, right? That's three. Mm-hmm. And so how much of HubSpot's growth is probably lifted from the freemium model? This is why they do it. It's why they have the product-led growth in the PLG, because they can mine through them and go, you look like you're getting a lot out of this. If you convert here, you get all this. And I think that's why they grow. And I think more SaaS companies will figure that out down the road, where they go, yeah, for the cost of holding some data, et cetera, it's not that big of a deal for us to get there. So.
And today, it's funny, you mentioned machine learning and just these capabilities of being able to analyze large volumes of data. I always talk to people about what we do today and how we were literally incapable of doing this, 5 or 10 years ago, because of the cost of not only storage of the data, processing the data. And so now you can store tons of data and process tons of data and, get results back in seconds that you couldn't do before.
And it's part of it's the data architecture too, right? So for us, when we did we had an analytical database that was a full copy of the database went over just for the analysts, because they were running SaaS. And if you know anything about SaaS at the time, SaaS was a server hog. If you gave it any resources, it took it, and everything else was shut down. So they were running SaaS on it nonstop. We had another database for business analytics and reporting, and then we had another one for campaign operations, and we synchronized them all, right? That was the way for us to create a structure that didn't interrupt business operations, allowed us to execute campaigns, but then would allow us to model score, put that back in, and then run with it. So you'll see more of that. But today, the tools, Python wasn't even really around then. SAS, SQL, that was what most of everybody was doing. So now there's multiple languages you can do this in, R, Python, etc., that you can write a lot of code and do a lot of things. And if you understand how to reduce data down by looking at things that are sort of working together, then you're probably in the right place. But to me, from what I've seen, I don't think there's a lot of B2B SaaS that's doing that. I really don't. I get the sense that their focus on growth is sales. Let's get top line sales. I'm like, no. It's this bottom piece. You got to remember that.
Mhm.
Half of your growth is sitting inside your business already.
Yeah,
I was going to say full circle. You mentioned Omni IQ basically and building custom audiences, David. So that was sort of our goal to build a PLG strategy. So in that premium model. But yeah, I agree with you 100% there, Chris.
I just, you get people and let them test, let them kick it around, and they'll figure out what they need. And like, it's like the ICP. We'll go back to that again. You have an ideal customer profile. Like, oh, God, look at all these people in the ICP. But we also tell people buy, organizations pay. Well, the people are all different. So none of them actually match the ICP. They're kind of, it's a sort of like a shadow concept of this is kind of what the person's like. But each person comes in with a different issue that they have to solve. And they're never the same. And so your ability to let them just get in and play with the tool to solve their own problems, and you watch that and go, because you'll see it and go, oh man, I'm sure HubSpot watched when we need custom objects in the worst way. And so custom objects came along, right? They figured this stuff out like that. And in the last 2 years, they released more features than they've done ever. And it's become very, very dynamic. And that's exactly where the B2B SaaS people should be, is sitting there looking at the applications going, how are they using it? And then build more things that help them do what they're doing. So, yeah. And that's almost all first party data too.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. So it's going to be very, very important for you to collect the right data in order to, emulate your strategy and implement your strategy. So it's good stuff.
I'm going to ask you an off-topic question real quick.
Uh-oh.
It's the favorite 5. And so this is like a curiosity question for me. So what are 5 things that make your work life easier or that you wouldn't want to live without? And this can be anything from like family to a specific laptop to a piece of technology that you absolutely love. What are your top 5?
That's a really good question.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, it really. When I think about technology, I mean, I'm gonna confess to something. I want to forget when I sit here. I'm a note taker, and I create little notebooks out of 8.5 by 11 paper. I fold over, staple, and tape because the damn things come apart. And I write notes. I have tons of notes. I'm a note taker because I remember things that I write down. I remember them much. It's terrible habit. So that technology is paper. I'm pretty good. That's 1. Pen, that's 2. I always write pen, never pencil. I just scratch it out. There's a funny story there. When I came out of college, I actually tested to be in the U.S. Foreign Service, and I took a test here in Columbus. Didn't even study, didn't prepare. Passed it. So they invited me to D.C. to interview, and at the end of the interview, I had to write an essay that said, "How did it go?" And it had to be 500 words, and I wrote like 513. I was like, I tried to fix it, but turned it in. They're like, well, the only reason you didn't move forward is 513. Did you know you just cross a word out? I'm like, shit. So I've been crossing things out ever since. We're like,
they don't teach you how to do that in school. It's like it has to be at least 3 pages or at least 5 pages.
Be done. Yeah, whatever. So yeah, and for me, I use emails and text messages. I do communicate with that. I don't like a lot of SMS text. I don't do a ton of that stuff. It's very distracting to me. But I do like spreadsheets too. Spreadsheets are a killer for me. The problem for spreadsheets though is that I have found people have fiefdoms where all of their stuff is in a spreadsheet and nobody else in the organization has it. Yeah. And or you've done something funky in there that nobody knows what you did.
Yeah.
Or my best case, when we came in and they were all locked, and I was like, why is your workbook locked? Oh, because there's formulas I don't want anybody to mess up. I'm like, this was a company that we were installing a business intelligence system in. And so they started with the original data. And when they came back, it didn't match anything that were in those books. I was like, uh-oh. You can see that one coming a mile away, right? People change things as they go and they sort of lock it so you can't see it. So I don't like that. But all those, I think spreadsheets are a great tool. It allows you to figure things out and analyze behavior and stuff like that. So they're good. That'd be my 3, 4, 5 right there. So,
well,
is that good?
Those are really good ones. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, Chris, I have an Excel. I want to jump in because I have an Excel spreadsheet / data situation that I got into with a partner, data partner, call them, just a few months ago. and I was on the phone with somebody there, and I'm like, they were asking me for certain data assets if we had them or whatever. And I'm like, I told him, I said, well, we sent you those data assets. You have them. They're in your platform. And he goes, well, I don't see them here on my spreadsheet. And I'm like,
there.
I think their platform was like just a front end to a spreadsheet or something. I have no idea. It's all smoke and mirrors, and they're running the business off of a spreadsheet. And I was just like, oh my God.
I mean, so like I'm working on an MVP right now for a SaaS product, believe it or not. When did I concept it out for a couple of years? That was what I was sort of flashing over there. And I go and I'm like, I've got to build a database. Open Airtable, done. Import my sheet. Here's my columns. This is the data is done. I can do that stuff in like 10 minutes. That's crazy how fast that is compared to what it was just 20 years ago. And our ability to scale applications, that's one of the absolute best things about our economy right now is the API economy. And the reason why is everything can be connected. So this no code thing that's going on right now is going to explode.
Yes.
Because I could build Buffer. I could build Buffer tonight.
That's crazy.
Buffer, right? I don't tell Shield I could build the Shield. I could build Shield tonight. It's not that hard. But I mean, I connect the APIs for LinkedIn. I auth in. I put in a thing for your users to log in and auth in. Your stuff is there. Off we go. Right? This technology and this API connectivity allows you to create applications at light speed and put things in the market. And this is one of the things we talk about with management consultants is that we could put an application out there that will give you a competitive advantage in the market like that. And it's like 25 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand. It's not a lot of money. We can do it fast. And I mean, you're talking 30 days. It's in market. And so that's one of the technologies I really, really am watching intently right now, because I think they're game changers because they take small businesses and now you can compete and run circles around the big ones. That's a big one.
Yep.
Good times.
That is big. So Chris, you said, and this is changing gears a little bit again.
Are you using my words against? You're using my words against me.
Yes.
It was
a really good quote, so I wanted to share it again.
In the light, like oh no.
Digital marketing stormed onto the scene when Google liberated search. Marketers hustled off to email marketing and loaded our inboxes and digital ads for their conversion and direct mail. But as a new generation of marketer came in, they were also greeted with CRMs like Salesforce. So all the way back in 2004, we were talking about customizing content for customers and interactions, but the foundation was always data, customer entry and identification, current topic of identifying customers across mediums, and customer data integration. I think we already said that one. But the process of a single view of a customer, unquote. So from your perspective, when does a business know that their CRM data has reached a point where they could, benefit from identity resolution?
So I'm surprised this hasn't happened yet, to be honest with you. And I think this is because there's different data owners, and even this breakup of Google is probably going to put this further behind than what it should. And they used to be like social security numbers, but you really don't hold on to those. Although everyone else seems to have lost them, so what the heck? Yeah, it's been stolen so many times. For me, so let's talk about CRM first. That might help.
Yeah.
CRM for most people today, like, oh, I have CRM, I have HubSpot. I'm like, no, it's a piece of software. CRM are 6 business processes, and those business processes are very important because the first one is customer data entry and capture. When I capture that customer, what do I do with that data? How do I structure it? How do I enable it? And is it the data I need to do the next step? The next step is data integration. How do I deduplicate that, integrate it with other data to make sure now I can start to see the customer? After that comes analytics. I'm going to start analyzing this data so I can do insights on, oh, this is how the customer, $1,000, 2 different people. Got it. Right. Then you use that for campaigns. Then you use that to learn. You learn from your campaigns, and then you take your learnings and you do touch point management. Those are the 6 processes, right? And they were defined by McKinsey in like 1998, maybe 99. And I still have yet people like, customer experience is going to be, nope, that's touch point management. It's better than CRM. It's part of CRM. It's not better. It's the last part. where you're managing the experience with the data that you collected at the start. When you understand that, then you can sit down and go, I want to have the ability to send cold emails that aren't cold. This came up in Whiskey Wednesday last night. And we had a conversation about, should marketing or sales collect that data? Because you have SDR sitting there trying to collect all this data. And I'm like, no, because the API to LinkedIn can be sorted into a custom application in your business where you pull in all the comments that the people that you're tracking are making, sort that through, put it into their profile, and then sit down and go through for keyword searches and say, this is what they're talking about. And if they match a keyword, here's how we're going to customize. Yeah, that's all doable today, right? So there's ways to do these things where you use it. But if you start with the data, you start planning at the very beginning. How am I going to collect this? What's it going to be? How do I structure it? What do I have to enhance? What do I have to get third party? What can I do myself? How do I transform data into information? People use those interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. Data is a piece of pixels. Information is something that you've done where you're transforming it. It gives you insights and actions that you can take from it. And so as we can continue down this path, I think people will get to that process when they can really create cold emails that aren't cold anymore. It sounds like you've known me forever versus the 4 that I got today that didn't sound like they knew me at all. So I think that's where you'll know that you've gotten there as an organization, that you can create fully customizable, almost conversational emails with someone, and it feels normal, but it's somewhat automated. And that we have the ability, people just don't do it.
Absolutely.
But the results are better. Quality over quantity.
Yes, absolutely. Because quantity could just keep us busy, and we don't need to be busy. We want to be focusing on the quality work. So what do you think is the most important thing a brand can do as they scale their marketing data? So like from CSV list, from like being a new business to CRM, then to identity graph. And David, what might you add? Like what is the most important thing that they can do as they scale?
Who do you want to answer first?
Well, she asked me to add, but I don't mind going first. I mean, I think, and Chris, you were just talking about this. Yeah, okay, Josh.
The story of thunder did I?
But Chris, you were just talking about this. I mean, you're learning about your existing customers, right? And so to me, I think that's such an important piece that we've been trying to educate our customers on. It's one thing to go out and get third-party data to learn about your existing customers, but historically, third-party data has always been pretty bad, right? And there's just so much bad data out there. So relying on that is kind of like dangerous for your business. When you have these customers and you already have them, you already have a relationship with them, so you need to just be building that relationship and building on that relationship so you can learn more about them, so you can really understand what their needs are and continue that conversation and support them.
So this is an interesting question too, right? Because there's a trick in here that it's one of my favorite tricks. If you're doing B2B work, why aren't you collecting B2C data on the people who are buying from you? Mm-hmm. You're collecting B2B. Well, the firmographics, who gives a crap about that? That person's not the firm. It's a person. Why aren't you collecting information on them? Right? Because that's what you need to know. And when you sit down and talk about account-based marketing and profiling, you're collecting the consumer data, right? So I don't think that B2B people went, wait a second, we need other data on these people. Yeah, you do. Yeah. And when you get that, I think you mature very quickly, and you can do it at scale now because the data is certainly there. And you're right, there's a lot of third-party data that's not worth a lot. And there's some stuff you put in there just to give you direction, right? It's like we would use income ranges just to give us an idea of what your disposable income was. So when we marketed to you, we kind of felt like we understood what you were doing. So it really depends. I think if you're going to scale, hopefully you don't start with a CSV. You might.
Right.
You never know.
If you're small, you don't need a CRM.
Honestly, I think most people start today with their contact file in Gmail.
Yes, a Google Drive.
Right,
like,
a Google Drive or Gmail or whatever you have. You have your contacts in there and Google Contacts, and that ends up being your first CRM. And people don't even think about that. I'm like, but I know,
Absolutely.
I
That was
mean,
the first thing we did on political campaigns was look at the political candidates' like personal contacts.
well, what do salespeople do? Like, my contacts.
Exactly.
They're not staying here. That you can have a copy, but they're coming with me.
But to your point, you're if you're a salesperson, right, you're selling to people. You're not selling to businesses. So
and I know.
you need to know as much as possible about those people.
Can you
build those relationships?
Imagine in 2004, you start a conversation with this funny dude named Jeff Bezos, and you're like, I think Amazon should take Bill Me Later. 5 years later, he finally signs on the dotted line. How much information do you think they have in the CRM about Jeff? It may not have been in the CRM. It might have been in some of the personal sales because they didn't really want to put it everywhere. But you learn things about who's his wife, who's his kids, and what's he like to do? Does he fish? What's he do? You learn a lot about that, so you can have a conversation with him because he doesn't have a lot of time. And so you imagine that repository of information that salespeople have and why they take it with them is because when you do business with somebody in 2004, you can do it in 2006 when they move, 2008 they move, 2010. You might do business with them 10 times in the course of your career. That's a lot of money, right? So you tend to do that, and it's one of those things that Jesse and I were talking about a couple Whiskey Wednesdays ago about the connector and the salesman, right?
Yes, that was a good one.
Connector just knows a ton of people, and they know a ton of people, and the salesman has the ability to convey emotion to people and pass emotion to people when they sell. So just how they do, they nod their heads, and everybody's nodding their heads, and they're smiling, and everybody starts smiling. That's the salesman, right? So, and those people, they have this way of connecting with people, but they use tools to remember all those people. One of them was Paul Horchow, is the founder of Horchow's, and he had lists. Oh, the bed janitor, black hair, where's the bandana? Right. So he knew the guy's name. He remembered. He had like thousands of people that he remembered. It was weird. So yeah, I think that's where people will scale. The more that you can scale and customize, and I think individuals, as we build personal brands, will have those that we take with us.
Absolutely.
So, kind of speaking of that first-party data, and this is for both Chris and David, what do you think that brands can do to leverage the power of that first-party data? And also, kind of in addition to this, can you talk a bit about the data privacy and what the small brands can do to make sure they're respecting their audience? And I'll hit Chris with this first, and then we'll follow up with David.
I'll first. So first-party data. So there's multiple components to first-party data, right? There's operational data, what you're doing with the tools or the systems or whatever we sell you, the products that you consume, etc. There's operational data, there's order values and things like that. And then there's observational data, if you want to call it that, where you're consuming content, you're watching things, you're engaging on sites, you're engaging with tools that we have. How you might be using the tools isn't necessarily about what you're using them for, but I think you'll use more first-party data there. So you'll sit down at some point in time, you'll go back to the value chain and go, here's all the data that I could collect. Do I need all that? Because there's some data you just, timestamps. I'm not sure how much you need all the timestamps we have, but you got a lot of them. So, and then you'll sit down and say, well, what do we want to do with the experience? And I think part of it happens when businesses have a vision of where they're going. It's much easier to sit down and say what you want to start collecting now and when, than if you are just sort of running around and go, tomorrow we might change something. Well, you didn't lay the groundwork to collect that data. And when you said, well, why can't we personalize? Why can't we run a loyalty program? Well, we didn't collect the data to do it. Right? We should have done that 3 years ago. So the people who plan a little bit and look forward and have a vision of where they're going, I knew HubSpot was going to be the competitor to Salesforce. They knew it too. It was just when they broke up that everything got released. And when they broke up, everything got released. And so they had a plan and a vision, and they were collecting that data all along. They are. And the same is true for Loom and some of the others that are out there, that when you have a vision for where you want to go, it's much easier to sit down and say, what data do we collect? What's the value of that first-party data? If you're using machine learning or any type of modeling, you'll be able to sit down and say, when a customer comes into me on this path of data, they have an X% chance that they're going to be worth Y. You'll be able to forecast that. We did. deal with consumers, you deal with consumers, you deal with business, right? So you'll sit down and look at the data elements that they're using, how they're using the tools, what they're buying, solutions, et cetera, and you'll be able to forecast their LTV. And that gives you the ability to sit down and say, how much will I invest in them now when I know they're going to be worth $10,000 down the road? So that's what I think they'll do. And about being respectful for the audience, I've thought about this a lot. I think what's going to end up happening, because this is a little bit of Web3 too, right? Is that the consumer will own everything. Okay, well, what are you going to pay me to have my information? And it might flip the other way. Well, if you want my discounts, you got to share your information. Right? I have discounts for you, but I don't know what the heck you like because you hide it all. So now you don't get any discounts. Why do I pay higher prices? Well, because you didn't share your data. Oh, it's going to be both ways. It'll be a very interesting. I see things like that coming along where people can sort of flip the switch a little bit. So we'll see. That's actually kind of the product that I'm working on too, believe it or
not. Yeah. So jumping in, I guess, as far as, brands respecting their audience, I think that's important. In today's world, I think that what's really important is transparency. And so if you're collecting data, I think it's really important to explain in simple terms why you want this data and what you're going to do with it. I think it was somewhat, I think it was on one of these, I don't know, it was one of these podcasts or a webinar we did where someone mentioned that Gap has a thing where it says, we're going to collect this data because we want to know what sizes you might buy, and we're going to make it so much easier for your shopping experience, whatever. And I think that transparency is really important in order to gain people's trust. But then I think that the secondary part to that is making sure that you live up to that, and you keep your promise to keep that data secure and to use it the way that you say you're going to use it. So I think that's where my thoughts are around privacy and respecting the audience. As far as brands using first-party data, I think that this is an obvious opportunity for me to plug OmniIQ, because I think that one of the most important uses of first-party data going forward will be in machine learning, and I think that it will become a tool that platforms such as ours will be able to enable brands to leverage their first-party data to find more customers that will buy from them. Using machine learning to understand customers and their potential buying habits and things like that. And I think that going away from third-party data and the less reliance on third-party data, this is a way that brands will be able to use first-party data to grow their business instead, not just internally with their existing customers, but also externally finding new customers.
It's interesting that you mentioned Gap, because we shop a lot at Old Navy, always online. But I'm always one of those people where I'm like, I don't want to sign up for your list. I don't want to sign up for your list. But a year ago, I went, we go shopping a couple times on a year, and I guess it was the cookies or something. It said, hey, you've shopped here X amount of times according to your address here. And by the way, if you would have signed up, we could have sent, this is how many points you would have accrued, and this is how much money you would have saved. And when they showed that number, I was like, oh, well, let me sign up, because I could have saved a whole bunch of money. So, talking about kind of incentives, like, hey, give us your data and we'll give you, the discounts.
See, I think people get weirded out. I think the one thing that weirds out almost everybody is remarketing. And it's the one tool that we love the most. We're like, oh, this thing's so, because it's so inexpensive. But it's the remarketing. They're like, oh my God, you heard me. Oh my God, they're listening to me. And I'm like, oh my God, we're not that good. We're not really listening to you. We really don't know those things. We're not that good. We're close, but we're not that close. But they're so freaked out about it, because when they get the remarketing, they're like, how in the hell? I'm like, well, my wife's like, oh my God, I started getting these things for this, that, the other. We were just talking about it. I'm like, well, we share the same IP address in the household. Oh yeah. Like, she works in e-commerce. I'm like, come on, Lisa. So, I mean, and that freaks people out a little bit, because they don't understand how that is. And they feel like you're spying on them But at the same time, if you said, "Hey, I'm going to get you an extra 25 off $100," like, "Oh, great!" They don't care.
Yeah.
So, and also, I think there have been companies who have been, man, the number of breaches. It's so bad. Every one of the bureaus, every credit bureau has been breached. The government's been breached. Everybody's been breached, and it's like, protect that data. So of course they now are like, well, there's nothing to protect anymore. You can have it all. So it'll be interesting to see. I do think that the changes that are coming right now with some of the privacy, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about kind of this, Gap and Old Navy, kind of these B2C companies, one of the things that, and I even see it on TikTok, where here is an opportunity for B2B to be creative and to have fun, but and there's more and more and more advertising happening constantly, but it feels like it's still very serious. As opposed to watching something like a B2C, like again, Old Navy, they basically on their advertising, they said, you know what, here, you run our commercials for us. So what is it, Chris, in your opinion, what is one thing that B2B could actually learn from our B2C?
I think that the B2C space does a lot more on behavior, right? We do a lot more behavioral work. And so let's think of it this way. Let's say you're the director of marketing for an e-commerce brand, and you might have an email marketer on staff. You might have a copywriter as a contractor. You have somebody doing ads, probably an agency, but you're running everything. You're responsible for acquisition, retention, and growth. Now look at the B2B model. It's not like that. There's people all over the place that are not responsible. They're responsible for growth that they say is top line growth. And it's I've got to acquire customers, right? Acquire. And so little focus on how do we improve the value of the existing people we have. So I think that's where B2B and B2C sort of differ. The person who does that in B2C is usually the same person, and it's different people in B2B. So that's a little tricky. But when you look at places like TikTok is singularly one of the funniest places on earth. I laugh. I found myself on there for like 45 minutes going, oh my God, it's 45 minutes. I'm just laughing through the whole thing. Going, this is hilarious. There's some sad stuff on there, but there's a lot of funny stuff on there. And people want to be entertained, right? So if you're a B2B and you can come up with entertainment, that's great. But part of this goes back to brand as well, right? So it's like Mercedes-Benz all of a sudden becoming funny. It doesn't really work. Or if you built your brand around, we're serious business intelligence, but here's a joke. No one's going to get it. It's kind of like even seeing some of the influencers on there when they first just natively just buy this product. I use it all the time. Right? And then you're just like, that wasn't what you were doing before. That was really funny. So it's called a break, right? There's a break in what your brand persona is, and you violate it a little bit in terms of just nakedly hawking products. So you have to be more educational, more informational, have a little fun. So like if you wanted to teach somebody about, digital ads, you could play tic-tac-toe. TikTok, right? So, and if which digital ad is the right ad? TikTok, the X, right? You make a game out of it, and it's fun. All right, you can do if you do fun things like that, they learn, you're engaged, they're learning something along, they're having a good time. The people who are going to take a lot of serious approach, there will be some that gravitate to it, but they're only Gen Z, and I don't see it. So it's a tricky platform, and it requires a lot more discipline than any other one. More than LinkedIn, more than anything else. You're constantly recording. It's tricky. But it's interesting too. It's a big audience.
Yeah.
So, B2C should rock and roll through there. B2B is going to have a tough time.
Yeah, definitely. So Chris, curious, we were talking earlier about the volume of data and availability these days, and I'm curious what you think. You think people are getting caught up in all the data, mining it, the analytics and stuff, or are they really making creative use of it? I know that there's so many tools that are helping people do it. I've seen a lot of people stumble and get overwhelmed with it. What are your thoughts there? I mean, are you seeing a lot of creative uses of it yet, or do you think we just haven't, we're still have a ways to go there?
Oh, there's some creative uses. I've seen a couple come out where I'm like, that's data driven. I can tell there's some data driven stuff coming out where you're like, that's a very, very intelligent spot. There was one from it's a company that does like heat mapping on your websites, and they had clearly understood the frustrations people have of just not knowing how things are working on their site, and they showed somebody frustrated, so they use their data to figure out how to do the ads. When you get into large enterprises, what I have found in the last 30 years is silos still, and I'm like, man, I'm lots of them, and you're just holy cow. So there's never going to be a single view of customer data. They're so big and mammoth. You're just like, oh my god. And it's not necessarily B2B that's like that too. It's B2C. There's some B2Cs out there that you're like, wow, your stuff is all over. And there's fiefdoms. Yep, I run digital ads. You get your data. I'm like, hold on, we want some of this over here now. Yeah, and like, wow, you're doing different things. Running email campaigns without the benefit of your digital ads, without the benefit of direct mail, and you don't know what you're doing, and it's all over the place. And you're like, oh, that's chaotic, and you're like a $30 billion company. How in the world did you get there? And because at one point in time, it was all together. And then as you grow, it expands. So that's a problem. And that's where machine learning can come in, right? Machine learning can reach across all those different things and build data instances and pull data together and find those patterns that will solve problems, that will improve efficiency, it will improve pricing. That's one of the solutions that I'm working on. That MVP is about pricing, because most people in e-commerce have no idea how to price their product. They just mark it up 3 times and stick it on the site. They don't know. They make it up. So my MVP is for a product where consumers can give them a price, make a bid, right? That's the deal. So, and what happens out of that is you would learn, well, at different segments in the market, different segments would pay different things for the same item. Some would pay more, some would pay less. That's a valuable piece of information to have, so you can produce variable pricing, right? So there's lots of things like that I think will happen, but there's going to be more machine learning. There has to be, because there's so much data. Some of it will be ignored. There's a lot of system data. Every now and then system data is useful. I worked for the payments company, and in the payments company, we had system data that we collected on every transaction. So every time you ran your credit card, we collected 300 pieces of data. And in that data was, I knew the nationality of your keyboard, your monitor, and your CPU. And if it was Russia, China, and North Korea, you got declined. Period. We're like, whoa, hold on there. Right? You could see things like that, and it would help you make better decisions. That company did not perform well in terms of sales, but had one of the best risk analysis solutions in the world, and didn't know it. And it's like, so I think people will do that. It's more data, but there's some of it's just there's too much. There's way too much. We'll see.
Chris, one last question from you that I'm completely curious about, and this is kind of on my own podcast, Empowering Her. This is kind of something I ask of everybody, because I'm always curious about life lessons that people get. So, knowing everything that you know now, what is, and you could go back to when you first started, what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself, and what are 2 things that you feel that you kind of lessons that you've really learned through the process that are important?
Jesse knows one of them, I think, for sure. The value of process. Check your work. She knows that one. She was laughing already. She knows what I'm going to say. So people make mistakes in work. You always check your work. Don't ever not check your work. And we have processes to check our work. And one time we did not check our work, and $443,000 later, they're like, holy. That was a big mistake. So I'm close to getting fired. Probably should have been, but I had a really good boss, and but 443, everybody in the Lions data knows what 443 is. So don't make that mistake. And so check your work. But I think the one thing that I would tell people that I've learned along the way is just be curious. And honestly, if you have the mind to do it, dig into the data, because there's something almost magical about seeing it, that you can actually see what you can do with it when you see it. And it's like, if I collect this data, we can do this. if I collect size, color, style, frequency of purchase, etc., I can create a clienteling program just for you that we might charge you an extra $20 for, but you come in for personal fittings, everything fits, we know your size, right? Everything's the colors you like, the styles you like. It's a great shopping experience. You're telling everybody about it. That all comes from data, right? We had an instance with one of our clients that actually went out to their customers and was looking at the undergarments that they wore, and they had one drawer that had all their lingerie, and the next one had all their, lady panties, and they're like, none of them were their brand, and they realized they didn't have a brand for that, and so they created $1 billion brand from it. Right? Sometimes you just have to go out and talk to customers too to get that data. That's first party data that's good for you to get though too. It's not something that you get in your information system. It's something that you sort of look at and go, where else could we grow and work with a customer, and you get some feedback and go, there's products that we're missing and things that we could put in solutions. So stay curious, use the data, and oh God, follow your process. Check your work.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So I guess one last question for me, Chris, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What do you see as the future of data in marketing, and what makes you excited or paranoid about it?
You've seen the movie Minority Report, right? Right. So that exists now, right? You can walk into an Amazon store in New York City, and if they put in a 3-dimensional hologram, it would say hello to you. It would know that you're in there. It's got a geo IP of your phone. It knows it's you. It knows what you're looking for. Oh, by the way, the Cheerios are over there on aisle 3, right? The 1% milk's back there, and we have almond milk in the back too, right? If you'd like a dozen eggs, it's sitting at the counter for you, right? That stuff is useful. For me, one of the more fun things that really hasn't happened yet is IoT, the Internet of Things. And the ability for your refrigerator to go, you know what, your milk shelf is a little bit light, which means you're low on milk. So why don't you I put it in your shopping cart on your phone. All I have to do is check out and pick it up on your way home. Or hit this and they'll deliver it to you in its home. That's how things will be, right? That's where data can solve problems, manage time, help you do things. I mean, if you scan every piece of groceries that you buy, because Kroger has that. I mean, you scan this stuff. They know exactly what you have in your house. Why aren't they sending you recipes going, hey, with what you've got in your house, you can make this, right? Hey, have you ever made Monterey Bay Cioppino? It's wicked, and you have all the ingredients for it. Here it is. I'm like, right? It's like, you love fish. Clearly, you have the fish in your house. And it's like, hey, go make this. So it's that type of intelligence that makes it a little, when you're sitting there, I don't know what's made for dinner. Kroger's like, I do. Here you go. Right. And they can help you do those things. How it organizes you and families, I think there's going to be a lot more of that. We are just starting to touch that. And I think that's the most interesting trend for me, because as a marketer, Google Voice has a problem for me as a marketer. It only gives you the top 3 results. So if you're on the top 3, if you say, hey, I should say, hey, Google is right over there. If I say that, hey, it will give me the top 3 results. So if you're not in the top 3, unless you ask for more results, that's all you get. So think about that as a marketer. I got to be in the top 3.
Yeah,
that's a problem. That's
very limiting. Yeah,
because we're not going to type this crap much longer. They're listening to us now, and they're doing a better job. So there'll be more of that and less of this, and that's interesting to me from a marketer's perspective. It's tricky. It's a challenge.
Absolutely.
IoT, man.
Wow.
Cook. I made Captain Crunch ice cream the other day.
Sounds good.
There's a chef named Christina Tosi in New York, and she made ice cream out of the cereal milk from cornflakes. And as soon as she made it on a show,
I've seen that.
She's amazing. And so I told my wife, we have friends that own a restaurant. They were over the other night, and I'm like, I could make Captain Crunch ice cream. He goes, oh, let's do that. So
you got to do that. Yeah.
That's fantastic too. It really is good. It's not good for you, but it tastes good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So now Google's going to tell me, go make some Captain Crunch ice cream.
Yeah. There should be some on your doorstep, some Captain Crunch tomorrow. So
it's melting.
Amazon will take care of that.
Thank you, Data.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's going to be like that, right? I mean, you're going to get to the point where you have routines and things to show up that are common in your shopping cart. They know that you're out of it. They can scan it. You scan it and it knows what you have.
I have a bunch of stuff on Amazon that's just I subscribe to, and it just knows it comes once a month or whatever.
Yeah, and then you can sit there and say it's seasonal. Hey, strawberries are in. Morel mushrooms are in. You want some? Oh God, yeah. Do you got those in my house? They're hard to get. I'm not going out in the forest to get them because they're really hard to find. So I mean, and they know they can see how you eat and what you eat and make the recommendations. Right? Why aren't they doing that now? And I have gotten some customizations in direct mail from Kroger that were astonishingly accurate. They knew we had a holiday coming up, and they gave a spread, and I'm like, that's almost exactly what I would make.
Well, to your point, it's surprising that our cars aren't tracking where we go, too.
So really, they're going to say, you want me to take you to the gas station? Sure. Yeah, we don't have any gas.
But this goes back to our first podcast when Josh asked David something, and it came up that David was getting all these McDonald's ads, and he hasn't been to McDonald's in I don't know however many years you said.
Yeah, I mean that was what I was talking about. My frustration with TV ads. The fact that they can't target them, and that they fell so far behind in addressability, and that it's just crazy how bad television advertising is and how untargeted it is.
Well, even Jesse was talking about today on LinkedIn about your advertising is going to be a little bit more restricted, and it's going to have to be a little bit more targeted. And those maids are going to be important, right? You're going to sit there and go, I got to have the right stuff to put in the right place at the right time for the right customer. But that's all doable if you start at the very beginning of the value chain and collect the data. And that's, we'll see. We're in a very, very interesting point in marketing where it'll blend into how you live.
Definitely.
A lot to come.
Well,
tell me Elijah Craig is almost gone. It's time. Going to be out for Whiskey Wednesday.
Well, I guess in closing, unless anyone else has anything to add, I'll pause there for a moment. We would love to get input from listeners about what or who you would like to hear on BDEX's new podcast, Deconstructing Data. And that's this live that we're talking on right now. It's Deconstructing Data. So we've already started the podcast. This is our first time going live. So thanks to those who listened in. But we'd like to know, what questions do you have, and what should we what kind of answers would you like us to find for you? We want to make this educational for our audience. So also, are there any guests you would like to suggest that we interview? So please send all of that information to us at info@bdex.com, and we hope to hear from you. But thank you so much, Chris, for being here, and Josh and David for sticking along.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris. Great meeting you, and great conversation.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. So thanks for having me.